Shalom. Imagine a river that flows downhill regardless of how desperately you want it to flow uphill. You can stand in that water. You can feel the urgency. You can push against the current with all your strength. But the river does not care about your emotion. It follows gravity, not feelings. It obeys law, not intention. Now ask yourself this question. Where in your life are you pushing against the current, expecting your emotion to change the direction of reality? There is a governing law at work here, one that most people never recognize because they are too busy feeling their way through life instead of understanding it. This law operates whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you even know it exists. Stay with me, because once you understand the law, life obeys, you will stop fighting it. I am Rabbi Ezra Melech. For 43 years, I have studied the patterns embedded in Torah text. But more than that, I have observed thousands of lives, families building and failing, businesses growing and crumbling, people succeeding quietly and others struggling loudly. This is not about belief. This is not motivational speaking. This is about recognizing patterns that repeat across generations, across cultures, across circumstances, regardless of emotion or intention. What I have learned is simple but difficult to accept. Life does not respond to emotion. It responds to structure. The person who understands this gains access to a different way of moving through reality. The person who fights this remains trapped in cycles of effort without result, sincerity without success, good intentions without good outcomes. Let me be clear about something from the beginning. I am not here to inspire you. I am not here to make you feel better about your situation. I am here to teach you about law. The kind of law that governs how things actually work, not how we wish they worked, or how we feel they should work. Most people live as if reality should bend to their emotions. They believe that feeling strongly about something should make it happen. They think that caring deeply about a goal should guarantee its achievement. They operate under the assumption that sincerity equals effectiveness, that good intentions create good results, that effort alone determines outcomes. But life is not emotional. Life is structural. Consider the way creation itself unfolds in Torah text. First comes order, separation of light from darkness, waters above from waters below, day from night. Only after this fundamental structure is established does function begin. You do not see emotion driving creation. You see systematic arrangement, precise timing, purposeful sequence, creation before emotion, separation before function, structure before movement. This is not poetry. This is instruction. Where are you expecting life to move because you feel strongly? Where are you applying effort instead of seeking alignment? These are not rhetorical questions. They require honest examination of your actual patterns, not your preferred self-image. I remember observing a family in my community many years ago. The father was hard-working, sincere, devoted to his children. He felt deeply about providing for them, worried constantly about their future, spent long hours at his small business driven by love and responsibility. His emotion was genuine. His effort was substantial, but his business struggled year after year. Meanwhile, another man in the same community ran a similar business. He seemed less emotional about it, less dramatic in his approach. He worked methodical hours, followed consistent systems, made decisions based on patterns rather than feelings. His business grew steadily, quietly, without fanfare or crisis. The difference was not in their hearts. The difference was not in their effort. The difference was in their relationship to structure. The first man was constantly reacting to problems, to opportunities, to fears, to hopes. The second man was consistently aligning, with market patterns, with financial principles, with operational systems. One was driven by emotion. The other was guided by order. That is when I understood emotion was present in both cases, but order was present in only one. This observation led me to examine why emotion fails as a reliable guide for life decisions. Emotion changes. What feels urgent today may feel irrelevant tomorrow. What seems critical in the morning may appear trivial by evening. Urgency distorts judgment, making temporary problems feel permanent and minor issues feel major. Pressure creates mistakes because it forces action before proper alignment is established. Think about the decisions you have made under emotional pressure versus the decisions you have made from a place of calm alignment. Consider which category produced better long-term results. This is not about suppressing emotion or pretending feelings do not matter. This is about recognizing that emotions are information, not instruction. They tell you something is happening, but they do not tell you what to do about it. Imagine a compass needle that spins wildly when held near a magnet. The needle is not broken. It is responding to magnetic force, but it cannot provide reliable direction while under that influence. Emotion operates similarly in human decision-making. It responds to circumstances, but it cannot provide reliable guidance while those circumstances are pressing upon it. When alignment is present, something different happens. Structure channels effort efficiently. Order makes outcomes more predictable. Energy flows toward results instead of dissipating in reaction and resistance. This is why disciplined people often appear to accomplish more with less drama. They are not working harder. They are working within structures that multiply effectiveness. Alignment reduces friction between intention and result. When your actions match the actual patterns of how things work, rather than how you wish they worked, reality begins to cooperate. Not because reality has changed, but because you have stopped fighting the laws that govern it. When alignment is correct, effort becomes effective. This creates a shift in identity that most people never experience. Calm people are typically aligned people. They are not calm because they have fewer challenges or easier circumstances. They are calm because they have learned to work with structure rather than against it. Frantic people are usually misaligned people. They are not frantic because they care more or work harder. They are frantic because they are constantly fighting patterns they do not understand. Discipline creates dignity because it demonstrates mastery over impulse and reaction. Structure creates trust because it produces predictable results over time. Other people learn they can depend on you not because of your emotions or promises, but because of your consistent alignment with reliable principles. Life trusts those who live in order. This trust manifests in opportunities, relationships, resources, and outcomes that seem to flow more easily to structured people. Not because life plays favorites, but because structured living creates conditions that naturally attract positive results, while unstructured living creates conditions that naturally repel them. The person who understands this law stops expecting emotion to do the work that only structure can do. They stop trying to push rivers uphill through force of feeling. They learn to recognize the direction reality is already flowing and position themselves accordingly. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Two people want to improve their financial situation. Both feel the pressure of insufficient income. Both are motivated to change. Person A reacts to the emotion, takes on extra work frantically, pursues multiple opportunities simultaneously, makes quick decisions based on immediate relief needs. Person B responds to the structure, analyzes spending patterns calmly, identifies specific skill gaps methodically, implements changes systematically over time. Person A expends tremendous emotional energy and effort. Person B applies focused attention and consistent action. After 1 year, Person A is often more stressed and not significantly better positioned financially. Person B has typically made measurable progress with less drama and more sustainability. The difference is not in caring or trying. The difference is in recognizing that financial improvement follows structural laws, not emotional ones. This principle applies across every area of life. Relationships improve through consistent patterns of behavior, not through intense feelings or dramatic gestures. Health improves through sustainable systems, not through periods of motivated effort followed by periods of neglect. Skills develop through regular practice, not through passionate commitment followed by inconsistent application. Understanding this law changes how you approach problems. Instead of asking, "How do I feel about this?" you begin asking, "What structure does this situation require?" Instead of relying on motivation to carry you through challenges, you build systems that function regardless of your momentary emotional state. This is not about becoming mechanical or emotionless. Emotion remains important as information about your values, preferences, and responses to circumstances. But emotion becomes input for structured decision-making rather than the primary driver of action. The Torah presents this distinction clearly through the concept of building. Before any significant construction project, there must be planning, measurement, proper materials, correct foundation work. You cannot build a stable structure through enthusiasm alone, no matter how genuine that enthusiasm might be. The building process follows specific laws of engineering, material science, and structural integrity. Emotion can motivate the building project, but structure determines whether the building stands. Your life is a building project that follows similar laws. Career success, relationship stability, financial security, personal development, these outcomes are governed by structural principles that operate regardless of how you feel about them. The person who learns to identify these principles and align with them gains access to a different quality of living. Not necessarily easier living, but more effective living. Not necessarily more emotional satisfaction, but more actual results. Not necessarily more excitement, but more sustainability and growth over time. This requires developing the ability to observe your own patterns objectively. Most people are too close to their own emotions to see the structures underneath their results. They attribute success to good feelings and failure to bad feelings, missing the actual cause and effect relationships that determine outcomes. For instance, someone might believe they perform better at work when they feel motivated and worse when they feel tired. But careful observation often reveals that performance correlates more closely with preparation, organization, and consistent habits than with momentary emotional states. The motivated person who lacks structure often produces inconsistent results. The prepared person who works through systematic processes often produces reliable results regardless of their energy level on any given day. This observation leads to a practical question. What structures support the outcomes you want to create? This question shifts focus from internal emotional management to external system development. Instead of trying to maintain constant motivation, you build processes that function during periods of low motivation. Instead of depending on inspiration to drive action, you create routines that generate forward movement independent of inspiration. The difference between reactive living and structured living becomes clear over extended time periods. Reactive living creates cycles, periods of intense effort followed by periods of exhaustion, bursts of progress followed by setbacks, moments of clarity followed by confusion. These cycles consume enormous energy while producing limited, sustainable advancement. Structured living creates steady progression. Daily, small actions aligned with long-term patterns produce compounding results over time. The person who saves a consistent amount monthly builds wealth more effectively than the person who makes occasional large contributions based on emotional impulses. The person who maintains regular exercise habits develops better fitness than the person who alternates between intense workout periods and complete inactivity. This is not about perfection. This is about consistency with structure versus inconsistency driven by emotion. Some people resist this understanding because they believe structure limits freedom or creativity. But the opposite is typically true. Structure creates freedom by establishing reliable foundations that support spontaneous action. The musician who has practiced scales extensively has more creative freedom during performance than the musician who relies only on inspiration. The writer who understands narrative structure has more creative options than the writer who depends purely on emotional expression. Structure serves creativity by providing stable platforms from which creative risks can be taken safely. Emotion without structure tends to produce chaotic results. Structure without emotion tends to produce mechanical results. Emotion channeled through structure tends to produce both meaningful and effective results. As you begin to recognize this law in your own life, you may notice resistance from people around you who operate primarily from emotional patterns. Structured living can appear less dramatic or exciting to those who are accustomed to emotional intensity as a measure of significance. But dramatic living and effective living are often inversely correlated. The person who lives with consistent alignment often appears calm to others, but this calmness masks tremendous power. Like a river that flows steadily toward the ocean, structured living moves consistently toward chosen outcomes without the turbulence that characterizes reactive living. This calmness is not passivity. It is the natural result of working with natural law rather than against it. When you stop fighting the current, you can direct your energy toward navigation rather than struggle. When you align with how things actually work, you can focus on where you want to go rather than on overcoming constant resistance. The practical application of this understanding begins with honest assessment of your current patterns. Where are you relying on emotion to do work that requires structure? Where are you expecting feelings to create results that only consistent action can produce? Where are you fighting natural patterns instead of learning to work with them? These questions are not meant to create judgment or self-criticism. They are diagnostic tools for identifying areas where alignment adjustments might improve effectiveness. Like a mechanic diagnosing engine problems, the goal is accurate assessment leading to appropriate correction, not blame or shame about current conditions. Once you identify misaligned patterns, the correction process involves substituting structural approaches for emotional ones. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, you develop systems that function regardless of motivation. Instead of making decisions based on immediate emotional responses, you create criteria for decision-making that operate independently of momentary feelings. Instead of relying on inspiration to drive progress, you establish regular practices that generate advancement through consistency. This shift typically produces initial discomfort because it requires acting without the familiar energy of emotional drive. But over time, it produces a different kind of energy, the energy that comes from seeing consistent results from aligned action. This energy is more sustainable than emotional energy because it is based on actual effectiveness rather than temporary feelings. The compound effects of this approach become visible over months and years rather than days and weeks, but the visibility when it comes is unmistakable. Life begins to flow more smoothly, not because circumstances become easier, but because your relationship to circumstances becomes more effective. People who live this way often find that opportunities seem to appear more frequently, relationships become more stable, and challenges become more manageable. This is not because life grants special favors to structured people, but because structured living creates conditions that naturally attract positive outcomes, while minimizing the creation of unnecessary problems. Remember that this is not a belief system requiring faith or conviction. This is recognition of patterns that operate whether you acknowledge them or not. You can test these principles in small areas of your life and observe the results objectively. You can experiment with substituting structured approaches for emotional ones and measure the differences in outcomes over time. The Torah teaches through pattern rather than persuasion for this reason. Pattern can be observed and tested. Pattern produces consistent results across different circumstances and different people. Pattern operates according to law, not according to opinion or preference. Life does not negotiate with emotion. It does not make exceptions based on sincerity or intensity of feeling. It responds to alignment with its fundamental structures just as gravity responds to mass regardless of human desires or emotions about falling. This video is educational and reflective in nature. It is not financial, legal, or investment advice. When you understand this law, you gain access to a different relationship with reality. Instead of trying to convince life to cooperate with your emotions, you learn to cooperate with the structures that govern outcomes. Instead of fighting against natural patterns, you learn to work within them. Instead of depending on feelings to create results, you build systems that produce results regardless of feelings. This is not about abandoning emotion or becoming mechanical. This is about proper ordering, emotion as information and motivation, structure as guidance and implementation. When these elements are properly aligned, both feeling and effectiveness increase simultaneously. If this brought clarity to your thinking, I invite you to subscribe, not for motivation, but for understanding, structure, and peace. Life does not obey emotion. It obeys law, whether we notice it or not.